Welcome. Today we are going to dive into a topic that is as uncomfortable as it is essential. It is a conversation that often gets sidelined into memes about wine moms or dismissed as first world problems. But beneath the surface lies a profound sociological mystery that has been brewing for over 50 years. We are talking about the happiness gap. If you look at the trajectory of history over the last century, you would assume that women today should be the happiest humans to have ever lived. On paper, the progress is staggering. In most parts of the developed world, women have the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to choose their partners, and the right to pursue any career they desire. They are outperforming men in higher education. They are starting businesses at record rates, and they have more control over their reproductive health than any generation of women in the history of our species. By every objective metric of success and freedom, the needle has moved forward. And yet, the data tells a different story. A story that researchers call the paradox of declining female happiness. Since the early 1970s, subjective well-being surveys have shown a consistent and measurable decline in the reported happiness of women. This isn't just a vibe or a trend on social media. It is a statistical reality documented by economists like Betsy Stevenson and Justin Wolfers. Their research found that in the 1970s, women reported higher levels of subjective well-being than men. But as the decades rolled on, that lead evaporated. Today, despite all the gains of the feminist movement, women are not only reporting lower levels of happiness than they used to, but they are often reporting lower levels of happiness than men. So the question we have to ask is, why? Why does having more feel like less? Why does the expansion of choice feel like a tightening of the noose? And is it that women are always unhappy? Or is it that we have built a world where happiness is structurally impossible for them to maintain? To understand this, we have to look deeper than just the current decade. We have to look at the evolution of identity. For thousands of years, a woman's identity was tied to her utility within a tribe or a family. This was often oppressive, yes, but it provided a clear script. Today, that script has been shredded, and in its place, women have been given a blank page and told they must write a masterpiece or they have failed. This is the burden of potential. When you are told you can be anything, the pressure to be everything becomes a haunting, ghostly presence in the back of your mind. We are living in a time where a woman's identity is fragmented. She must be the nurturer, the hunter, the diplomat, and the aesthetic object all at once. This fragmentation prevents the flow state required for true happiness. Happiness requires a unified sense of self, but modern life demands that women be a collection of roles that often conflict with one another. This leads us to the concept of the second shift. Back in the 1980s, sociologist Arlie Hochschild coined this term to describe a phenomenon that is still very much alive today. The theory is simple. Even when a woman works a full-time job, the same hours as her partner, she returns home to a second shift of domestic labor. While the gap in housework has narrowed slightly over the decades, the division remains starkly unequal. But it's not just the physical act of vacuuming or doing the dishes that drains the spirit. It's the mental load, or cognitive labor. This is the invisible management of the household. It's the woman who remembers that it's school picture day, that the dog needs its heartworm pill, that the pantry is low on staples, and that a relative's birthday is coming up. This constant low-grade humming of to-do lists in the back of the brain leads to a state of chronic decision fatigue. When you are the chief operating officer of a family, you never truly clock out. You are always on. And that state of hypervigilance is the enemy of happiness. Happiness requires the ability to be present, to be still, and to have leisure. But for many women, Leisure is just another time slot to catch up on the things they missed during the day. This hypervigilance has a physiological cost: the cortisol loop. The female brain is traditionally wired with a larger prefrontal cortex and an amygdala that is highly sensitive to social discord and environmental stressors. This was an evolutionary advantage for keeping offspring safe and maintaining tribal harmony. However, in a world of 24/7 notifications, emails from bosses at 9 p.m., and the constant noise of a digital society, this system is being overloaded. Women are essentially living in a permanent state of fight or flight. When cortisol levels are chronically elevated, the brain's ability to produce dopamine and serotonin is inhibited. We are literally biologically blocking our own capacity for joy because we are too busy scanning for the next fire to put out. We have created a society that triggers the female survival response and then wonders why women can't just relax. This leads us to the perfection trap. We live in an era of curated excellence. Through the lens of social media, women are bombarded with the all-or-nothing pressure. You are expected to lean in at the office and climb the corporate ladder with the ferocity of a CEO. Simultaneously, you are expected to be a Pinterest mom who prepares organic bento box lunches and stays deeply involved in every developmental milestone of your children. And while you're doing all that, you're expected to maintain a rigorous fitness routine, a flawless skincare regimen, and a home that looks like a showroom. The bar isn't just high, it's contradictory. You cannot be a person who gives 100% to a career and 100% to a family and 100% to self-care. The math doesn't work. Yet, when women inevitably fall short in one of these areas, they don't blame the impossible system, they blame themselves. They internalize it as a personal failure. This creates a baseline of not enoughness that colors every achievement. You didn't get the promotion? You're failing professionally. You got the promotion but missed the school play? You're failing as a mother. You did both but haven't been to the gym in a month? You're failing yourself. This constant state of perceived failure is a recipe for deep, soul-level unhappiness. We also have to talk about the biological and medical context, which is often ignored or weaponized. The female body operates on an infradian rhythm, a monthly cycle that affects brain chemistry, metabolic rate, and cortisol levels. For decades, medical research was performed primarily on men, with the assumption that women were just men with hormones. This led to a massive gap in how we understand female health. Many women spend years being gaslit by the medical establishment when they report fatigue, chronic pain, or depression, often being told it's just stress. When your physical reality is dismissed by experts, it creates a sense of isolation. Furthermore, the transition periods of a woman's life, puberty, postpartum, and perimenopause, are massive neurological events. Perimenopause, in particular, can last for a decade and involves a significant drop in estrogen, which is neuroprotective. This can lead to anxiety, insomnia, and brain fog. If a woman doesn't understand why her brain feels like it's betraying her, and the society around her just tells her to keep going, the resulting unhappiness isn't a mystery. It's an inevitable consequence of neglected health. Then there is the choice overload problem. While freedom of choice is a fundamental good, the sheer volume of choices available to modern women can be paralyzing. 2 generations ago, the path for most women was relatively narrow and defined. While that was stifling and unfair, it offered a certain level of psychological clarity. Today, a woman has to decide every day who she is going to be. Am I a career woman? Am I a stay-at-home mother? Can I be both? Should I want to be both? Every choice carries the weight of what if. What if I chose the other path? This FOMO, fear of missing out, is amplified by a culture that tells women they can have it all. The truth that no one wants to admit is that you can have it all, but usually not at the same time, and certainly not without a massive amount of help that most people don't have access to. The have it all myth is perhaps the most damaging lie ever told to women, because it sets the default state to dissatisfaction. We must also consider the loneliness epidemic. Despite being more connected than ever, many women report a lack of deep, communal support. In the past, child-rearing and domestic life were often shared among a village of sisters, aunts, and neighbors. Today, we live in nuclear family silos, or alone in apartments. The burden of emotional regulation for the entire family often falls solely on the woman. She is the emotional sponge. When the kids are upset, she feels it. When her partner is stressed, she absorbs it. Without a robust community to pour back into her, she eventually runs dry. But here is the most fascinating part of the data. While women report more daily stress and higher rates of depression and anxiety, they also report higher levels of life meaning than men. This suggests that the unhappiness we see isn't a lack of purpose, it's an excess of pressure. Women are finding meaning in their roles, their friendships, and their work, but the cost of maintaining those things in the current social structure is becoming too high. This brings us to a phenomenon I call the digital panopticon of comparison. For most of human history, a woman's social circle was small and local. She compared herself to her neighbors, her sisters, and her friends. Today, through the smartphone in her hand, she is comparing her internal behind-the-scenes footage to the highlight reels of 4 billion other people. This creates a state of perpetual psychological poverty. Even if a woman is doing objectively well, if she is healthy, if her children are safe, if her career is stable, she feels poor because she is constantly witnessing someone who is richer, thinner, more traveled, or seemingly more loved. This digital exposure strips away the satisfaction of a good enough life. It keeps the brain in a state of high alert dissatisfaction, constantly signaling that you are falling behind in a race that has no finish line. We also have to explore the identity archetype crisis. In modern culture, we have replaced deep, meaningful feminine archetypes with shallow caricatures. We have the girl boss, the trad wife, the crunchy mom, the hot girl. These aren't identities, they are costumes, and women are being pressured to pick a team and perform that role flawlessly. If you're a girl boss, you aren't allowed to be soft or vulnerable. If you're a trad wife, you aren't allowed to be ambitious or intellectually independent. This forced polarization creates a deep sense of internal fracture. A woman is not a monolith. She is a kaleidoscope. When she is forced to suppress parts of her soul to fit into a social media-friendly category, the result is a profound, aching unhappiness. It is the grief of the unlived life. Furthermore, we must look at the devaluation of nurturing. We live in a world that only values what can be measured in dollars or data points. Because nurturing, whether it's raising a child, caring for an elder, or building a community, cannot be easily quantified, it is treated as non-work. Women, who still perform the vast majority of this labor, are essentially being told that their most significant contributions to humanity are worthless. This creates a crisis of meaning. When the things you spend your time and energy on are treated as invisible, your sense of self-worth begins to erode. You start to feel like a ghost in your own life, essential to everyone's survival, but recognized by no one. This invisibility is compounded by the hyper-responsibility trap. Women are socialized from a young age to be the fixers. If someone is unhappy, it's the woman's job to fix it. If the atmosphere in a room is tense, it's the woman's job to soothe it. This creates a life of external validation. A woman's happiness becomes dependent on the happiness of everyone around her. But because she cannot control the world, she is in a state of constant anxiety. She is trying to hold up a sky that was never meant to be her burden alone. This hyper-responsibility is the ultimate thief of joy, because it leaves no room for the woman to ask, "What do I want? What makes me happy, regardless of anyone else?" To understand why the needle on happiness has moved backward, we have to look at the different ways this weight is felt across generations. For the baby boomers and older Gen X, the struggle was often about being the first. They were the ones who broke into male-dominated boardrooms, who fought for legal protections, and who lived through the transition from homemaker to career woman. Their unhappiness often stems from a sense of exhaustion. They are the sandwich generation, squeezed between two different types of dependency, aging parents and adult children. And they are doing it in a society that offers very little in the way of elder care support. Then we look at the millennials and Gen Z. These women were raised with the promise that the glass ceiling was gone. But they entered adulthood during a time of unprecedented economic instability, rising housing costs, and the birth of the attention economy. For these younger women, the unhappiness is often rooted in perpetual comparison. They are the most educated generation of women in history, yet they are also the most debt-ridden and the most likely to experience burnout before the age of 30. When your entire identity is built on the idea of becoming, but the ladder of upward mobility has been pulled up, the result is a profound sense of existential dread. We also cannot ignore the economic anxiety and the pink tax on time. Modern capitalism has successfully monetized almost every second of our lives. If you have a hobby, you're told to start an Etsy shop. For women, who already perform the majority of unpaid labor, this pressure to optimize every waking hour is a direct assault on the ability to experience joy. Furthermore, there is a literal happiness tax. Women are marketed to more aggressively than any other demographic. They are told that happiness can be bought in the form of anti-aging creams and life-changing planners. This creates a cycle of hedonic adaptation, where women are constantly chasing a new version of themselves that is always just one purchase away. When you combine lower earning power with higher social pressure to spend on maintenance, you get a state of permanent financial stress. But perhaps the most profound source of the current unhappiness is what I call the institutional gaslighting of intuition. Throughout history, women have been the keepers of intuitive knowledge about health, about community, and about the rhythms of life. However, our modern world prizes hard data and linear productivity above all else. When a woman feels that something is wrong, that the pace of life is too fast, that her children are being over-socialized, or that her own body is screaming for rest, she is often told to look at the stats or be more efficient. We have trained women to ignore their own biological and psychological warning lights in favor of a corporate-friendly version of existence. This creates a deep, internal, cognitive dissonance. When your internal compass is telling you to stop, but the entire world is telling you to go faster, you end up in a state of chronic, quiet despair. This brings us to a critical realization. The happiness gap is not a reflection of female weakness. It is a reflection of a world out of balance. We have spent 50 years trying to fix the woman to fit the world, rather than fixing the world to fit the human. We tell women to be more resilient, to practice more self-care, and to manage their time better. But these are individual solutions to collective problems. You cannot time manage your way out of a culture that expects you to be reachable 24 hours a day. You cannot self-care your way out of a household where you perform twice as much labor as your partner. We must also confront the care crisis. As a society, we have outsourced and undervalued the very things that make life worth living: connection, caretaking, and community. Because women have traditionally been the primary providers of these things, their disappearance hits women the hardest. When a woman feels unhappy today, she is often feeling the absence of a support system that used to be a given. She is feeling the weight of being the sole emotional anchor for a family in a storm that never ends. So, where do we go from here? The answer isn't to go back to the past. The answer is to stop asking women to be superhuman. We have to start valuing care work, both in the home and in society, as a collective responsibility, not just a female one. We have to dismantle the perfection trap by being honest about the trade-offs we make. We have to demand a medical system that actually researches and respects the female endocrine system. And most importantly, women have to give themselves the permission to be mediocre in some areas so they can be happy in others. Being unhappy isn't a feminine trait. It's a human response to an unsustainable environment. When we stop asking, "Why are women always unhappy?" and start asking, "What are we expecting of women that is making them miserable?" we can finally start to close the gap. Maybe happiness isn't a destination we reach by doing more. Maybe it's a clearing we find by doing less. Maybe it's found in the gaps between the expectations, in the moments where we allow ourselves to just exist, unproductive, unpretty, and unbothered. The data shows that women's happiness is declining, but data isn't destiny. We are the ones who write the next chapter of this story, and that chapter doesn't have to be about perfection. It can be about something much better. It can be about peace. Thank you for being part of this long-form exploration. This is the kind of deep dive that helps us see the invisible structures of our lives. If this video gave you a new perspective, please share it with a woman in your life who might need to hear that she isn't crazy. She's just living in a world that asks too much. Subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology and sociology of our modern world. And as always, remember, you are enough, exactly as you are, without doing a single thing more.